Although Nichols draws decisive lines between his six modes of documentary, Oppenheimer uses several different aspects of each in his documentary to create a complex whole film. One of the modes the act of killing draws upon is the participatory mode, which is when filmmakers interact with his or her subjects rather than unobtrusively observe them. Nichols argues that meaning is constructed through the collaboration or conflict between the subject and the filmmaker. Even though we never see Oppenheimer or the crew visually, their presence is often alluded to through Oppenheimer's voice, the gangsters' eye contact with them, and the construction of the scenes in which the gangsters are showing something to Oppenheimer. As an audience, we are always aware of their presence. Moreover, the participation between the crew and the gangsters is made explicit through the processes of production as the gangsters film scenes for their own film. As Restoff notes, there is a hierarchy of power in the participation of social actors in the act of killing. While the film relies on the participation of the gangsters not only to share their lived experience, but also to construct a creative narrative around it, Oppenheimer has a separate agency to that of the gangsters and doesn't present the narrative the gangsters thought they were taking part in. Another example of Nichols' modes used in the act of killing is the performative mode. The performative documentary sets out to demonstrate how embodied knowledge provides entry into an understanding of the more general processes at work in society. It underscores the complexity of our knowledge of the world by emphasizing its subjective and affective dimensions. Oppenheimer evokes this by asking his subjects to reenact the killings in whichever way they please. Oppenheimer justifies this whereby reenactment reveals more of the narratives in operation in the present than it provides an adequate picture of the past. That is, through reenactment, Oppenheimer isn't concerned with the unreliable testimony of facts from the gangsters, but the truth of the history of the genocide and its continued power is in the gangsters' willingness to participate. This is seen when Anwar is playing a communist victim and becomes viscerally afraid, and later claims to understand what his own victims felt, but is quickly corrected by Oppenheimer that his true victims would have felt much more afraid. According to Wang, the gangsters are presented in a critical performative mode, which encourages the audience to feel disgusted by and angry at the subjects. The gangsters didn't believe they would be presented in this way. Described as that rare documentary, one that might actually change things, in 2014 by Mother Jones, the reception of Oppenheimer's film has been varied amongst Western and Indonesian audiences. In the West, the act of killing has been regaled with awards and accolades since its release. It was nominated for the Academy Award for Best Documentary Feature, as well as many others. However, while this film thrived in Western spectatorship, Oppenheimer claims that the real goal was to distribute this to as many Indonesian audiences as possible. Oppenheimer says the whole strategy of releasing the film in Indonesia is to avoid it being banned in Indonesia. We know that if we released it in theatres, the film would be banned and it would become a crime to watch the film. Because of this, Indonesia required a guerrilla tactic of distribution due to those censorship laws. If shown in cinemas or public spaces, it would have to be screened by the state censorship board. To get around this, the anonymous crew rolled out the film through invitation-only screenings to students, historians, and journalists. Moreover, the crew made the film free to download in Indonesia, uploaded a version onto YouTube, and worked with local DVD sellers to hold copies of the film in store or for free. It has now been seen by thousands of Indonesians in these non-official settings. In a Guardian article by Oppenheimer, he claims that Tempo magazine published a special double edition dedicated to the act of killing, including 75 pages of perpetrators' testimony from across Indonesia, to show that the film could have been made anywhere in Indonesia and that there are thousands of feared perpetrators enjoying impunity around the country and that the problems are systemic. This broke a 47-year silence about the genocide in the mainstream media. An editor at Tempo contacted Oppenheimer to confess that he had spent his whole time at the magazine censoring stories about the genocide. There was a time before the act of the killing and the time after, the editor told him. I don't want to grow old as a perpetrator. Moreover, Oppenheimer claims that the week the act of killing was nominated for an Academy Award, the Indonesian president's spokesperson acknowledged that the 1965 genocide was a crime against humanity and that Indonesia needs reconciliation, but in its own time. While this was not an embrace of the film, it was incredible because it was the first time the killings were not maintained as heroic. The Look of Silence was released in 2014 from Oppenheimer and his crew from the victim's point of view.